Hi friends, I'm Alicia, also known as Kinky Sweat if it's your first time here, and in this video we are going over 5 makeup tips to make your stage makeup fabulous. More specifically, virtual stage makeup. Given the times that we're in, there have been a lot of showcases done online, and it's really empowering and motivating to see all the performers, all the studios, all the organizations gather together and make it happen, given that normal times are very much different. And the topic that mostly comes up is, well, if I'm on camera, I'm not in real life, do I really need to worry about my makeup? Maybe you should, because you never know how the camera is going to look or your face is going to look on camera, and you don't want to lose your face, right? You want to see from head to toe, and with these 5 tips, hopefully you could be a little more comfortable in applying your makeup and be happier with how it turns out during your virtual stage showcase. So let's get started. I got my notepad over here, make sure I don't miss any tips. Foundation. This tip is mostly to match yourself well and to choose a foundation that is lightweight and not heavy on the skin. So for instance, I actually have the Oma Beauty Say What Weightless Foundation. This is just one example. You don't have to use this foundation specifically, but what I appreciate about this formula is that it's lightweight in texture, but it covers well. So I have a lot of hyperpigmentation that I found just maybe with a half a pump extra of this over the marks covers it well. And even if you are in your home or you're doing a virtual performance from a studio, it's just nice to feel your foundation not heavy on your skin while you're performing. So that's why I would always suggest using something lightweight. And within this complexion step, still remaining in our one tip, is to use a loose powder to set. So I like to use a loose powder because it's a little more airbrushed in finish. It definitely feels lighter on the skin, and I think it does help the foundation stay longer, right? Especially if you are an oilier skin type. You want to make sure that the oils don't break through your performance. If you sweat, having that layer of powder on the foundation definitely helps it stay intact longer. But you know the rule, anytime you start to sweat, you got to dab. You got to dab around and try not to sweep, because that's when you'll slide around your makeup and it'll look terrible. So that's tip number 1. Use a lightweight foundation and make sure you set it. Tip number 2, eye primer. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the beauty space, but there are a lot of tips going around where they suggest you can use a concealer to prime your eyes and to use a powder to set the concealer and then apply eyeshadow on it. I used to do that. Right, I used to follow the trend, but I found that what's most useful and a lot more helpful is using an actual eye primer. So this is the Hourglass Veil Eye Primer, and this is a Max Paint Pot in Soft Ochre. The difference is that concealers, like the one I showed here, is more emollient in nature, right? It's formulated to be applied under your eyes. Your under eyes are a lot drier than your eyelids. I know mine are. My eyelids are very oily. My under eye skin, not so much. So having a concealer that's formulated to tackle the dryness under your eyes might not be ideal to place over already oily skin. And when you powder it, it creates that extra layer that I feel can make the shadows look very heavy on the lid. So that's why I would suggest you use an actual primer that's a little drier in consistency, more lightweight, and it'll allow the shadows not only to pop, but to stay longer. So even if you are filming yourself at home or in studio for a virtual showcase, you want your shadows to pop from where you're performing. You want to make sure they stay on, that they don't slide around, especially if you're using a shadow that has a lot of texture, a lot of sparkle. And why don't we move into tip number 3? This is my 3rd tip, but I guess tip 3 and 2 and 3 go together, is to use a shadow that has a little bit of sparkle. So this is the Kaja Bento shadows, or bento box shadows, I should say. Again, you don't have to use this specific brand, but what I like about it is that they're very lightweight, and you could use your finger to just tap on your lid, and it gives such a beautiful dazzle effect. And I think it's really nice to have for a showcase that, especially if you don't like glitter. I think a lot of eyeshadow formulas have come a long way in terms of formulation, in technology, that although there are still glitters on the market, I would recommend you use something more like this that's more lightweight, and it still has that same dazzle effect, but it's not as heavy on the lids like an actual glitter, that the pieces are just heavier and they might not feel great on the skin. You could also risk scratching not only your eyelid but your cornea, which we don't want to do, especially while we're performing. So I think if you insist on using a texture that's more dazzly, that has that disco ball effect, that use something more of this nature that's a little more lightweight in texture, easier to use. This is another beautiful color. I love that. So you could have like maybe a shimmer shadow that's this shade, and then you tap this on top. Forget it, it's so good. And then you use the lighter shade on the inner part of the eye. You definitely want to apply, I could do it now, even with my finger. I could apply a little bit of highlight here. Yeah, so that brightens up the inner corners of the eyes. And you could also pop it, didn't mean to pop it on my crease, sorry, right on the center of your lid. And that's going to add dimension to your lid. It's going to add extra pop, excuse me. And that's just a surefire way to make your eyes stand out. And you might be wondering, well, Alicia, the camera's not going to be that up close. It's all about my movement. And you never know, friends. You want to make sure everything is intact. Whatever sparkle you can add, it makes a difference, because the light might catch your lids at the right moment. And look, your eyes are sparkling like your choreography. Next up, tip number 4. This is going to be against probably everything you've heard, but for stage makeup specifically, and I actually recommend this for photography, is less highlight. I know, what is she saying? Okay, hear me out, fam. If you happen to be in the space for your virtual showcase and there are diva lights or there are lights, when the light hits and the highlight is like blingity blang bland, it could be a little distracting. It could look like there's a spotlight on your face, that there's like a radar. It could be a little strange, and it could look strange on camera. I prefer something that's a little more lightweight in nature, that catches the light just enough so it definitely adds the dimension of your face, right? Because that's the last tip we're going to get into. When you add any type of contour or blush and then you add your highlight, it wants to be just enough, again, to make your cheekbones pop out, but it won't look super sparkly wet in your face. I find those effects are great maybe in person, but when I'm performing, or I've seen others perform and their highlight looks just like a streak, it doesn't look cohesive in terms of the final look that you're trying to create. So that's another thing too. Make sure you blend your highlight. You don't just want to go You want to buff it in. You want to make sure that the highlight spot is your highlight spot. Everyone's highlight spot is not the same. Some highlight spots are here, some are here. Mine, when I turn my head, you can see it's lower, right? Unless I go totally profile, maybe you could see it more around the corner of my eye, but it sits right here. So if you see something on Instagram or on YouTube, your favorite beauty guru is always applying the highlight there, that's maybe because that's what works for their face structure, but not necessarily for yours. So you kind of have to experiment when you sit in front of my window, not our windows, wherever we are, that when you turn your head, you can see where the light naturally hits, and that will be where you apply the highlight. And again, make sure, because it doesn't have to be crazy bling bling. If you want to go that way, but I feel for it to look more comprehensive overall for the look and to really look beautiful on camera, just enough to make it look radiant, luminous, and to add that extra light. And the last tip, I could do like 10 tips, but we're going to narrow it down to 5. The last tip I would say is probably what we've heard opposite of, is more is better. More is better when it comes to stage makeup, even if it's virtual, okay? The reason being, like the ones we've expressed in tip number 4 with the highlight, if you are in an environment with a lot of light, light takes away. It takes away. I had to make sure I had enough makeup on so that I look like I kind of have blush and bronzer on. But you know what, fam? You know what I really have on my face? I have cream bronzer. I have bronzer powder. Did I put on? I didn't. I have just powder blush, but I also have cream highlight, highlight powder, and a little bit of pinky cream highlight on my face. All those things, and it looks like I just have enough. So what might look like a lot in real life looks just right on camera. And that's what I would recommend that you remember when you are applying makeup for stage. Because what you might see in front of you as you are applying the makeup, it might be really intense. It might be like, whoa, what is going on? This is too much. What the audience will see through the screen, through a device, will be just enough, because you don't want to disappear completely. So what you would think is just enough in real life might disappear altogether on camera. And that's why I would suggest another 2-for-1, if you will. If you really want to make your bronzer or contour pop, I would then go in with a cream bronzer. This is a cream bronzer from Fenty. I apply that first. The one I have on is from Oma Beauty as well. Is their contour and highlight stick. I apply a little bit of the contour here on the hollows of my cheek, and then I actually go in with a powder bronzer to make sure not only will the cream bronzer set, but I add a little more color on top. And then if you want to go crazy cray, you'll apply a cream blush. You could put it on the apples of your cheeks, and then you can apply a powder blush on top. So if the powder blush decides to fade or begins to fade, you still have the cream blush under, so you still have color there as the fade goes, and it not just be your skin color, right? And then that's the same principle we apply for the highlight. You apply your cream highlight, and then you'll apply a powder highlight, not only to set it, but to add that extra glow, because we're going for glow, we're not going for wham bam, remember. But if you want to go wham bam with the highlight, I totally get it. And that all really depends on the type of highlighter that you use. There are a lot of formulas that are more lightweight, that are smoother, that are not as glittery. So choose one that's best for you. But you might look at yourself at the end of your makeup and think, wow, this is too much. Believe me when I tell you, when you get on camera for your virtual showcase, it will appear just enough. So hopefully those tips help. This is our first makeup vlog, if you will, and I'll be more than happy to come on here and actually do demonstrations. If you want me to just dissect any of the tips that I showed, that I spoke about in this video, then we could talk about how to apply bronzer, how to apply blush, how to apply eyeshadow, right? Because I do have a makeup channel and I love makeup nerdetry, if you will. So if there's anything else you all want to see, I'll be more than happy to break it down further. Thank you, PSO, for having me on your blog. And until then, fam, I will see you soon.